Welcome to another episode of the Diabetes Digital Podcast. Today, we are joined by one of our DD dietitians, and her name is Krystal Martinez. I'll get into her bio, but just want to give you guys a sense of what we're talking about on today's episode. So, one of the things that comes up a lot in the work that we do with patients is this idea of nutrition feeling very one-dimensional and almost European in the recommendations that are given. And how do we incorporate somebody's cultural foods throughout the entire year, including within the holiday season? I think there's a lot of guilt and shame around foods that we grew up with, and maybe they're not healthy, but that is a lie. And we're going to unpack that today with Krystal, which we think is the perfect episode for Christmas Eve as you head into the holidays. We thought it would be really good to have a conversation about this. Like, how can we still incorporate our favorite foods throughout the holidays and the whole year? So our guest today is Krystal Martinez. As I said, she is a dietitian with us, and she helps clients build a peaceful, empowered relationship with food and their health. She specializes in prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, PCOS, and digestive health, offering a compassionate, culturally grounded approach that keeps the favorite foods like tacos on the plate. As a first-generation Mexican American living with autoimmune arthritis and Sjogren's, Krystal understands the realities of navigating chronic conditions and making sustainable changes. Her work is rooted in empathy, humor, and real-world guidance that helps people find balance without restriction. So, Wendy, what are we covering today?
Yeah, so we are going to be talking with Krystal about some common myths around incorporating cultural foods, and also just practical guidance on how people can incorporate some of their favorite cultural foods or your favorite cultural foods, listeners, into your diet, not just for the holidays, but also in your day-to-day routine. And for those of you that have insulin sensitivity, we're going to be talking about how you can incorporate your favorite cultural carbohydrates within the context of a balanced plate so that you can aim for consistent and stable blood sugar. And then with the holidays coming up, we're also going to touch on how to keep your cultural food traditions alive during this very festive time. Welcome to the Diabetes Digital Podcast. I'm Wendy.
And I'm Jess, and we're best friends, registered dietitians, and diabetes educators.
Through our telehealth platform, diabetesdigital.co, we offer accessible and personalized virtual nutrition counseling for people with diabetes and prediabetes.
Visit diabetesdigital.co, that's C-O, to book your first appointment. We accept insurance and offer affordable self-pay options. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Welcome to the podcast, Krystal.
Hi, thank you so much for, inviting me, and I'm so happy to be here and just talk about Mexican food, which I love. I'm getting hungry now. But yeah, so happy to be here. But yeah, to share a little bit about myself. Yeah, I became a dietitian because I was working as a care coordinator at some point early in my career because I studied public health, right? Because I really felt there was a need, especially within my community. So as a Mexican, right, within the Mexican or Latino community, there was a lot of misinformation on, can I eat tortillas? Can I eat rice? Can I eat beans? Or my doctor told me I shouldn't. Or my friend, my Zumba class, they're going on the Herbalife diet, right? And there was like a lot of misinformation, which, was unfortunate. So that is something that as I was also working with patients and like giving nutrition education classes. And I'm like, no, like we have so many healthy food in our diet, right? Even corn tortillas, beans can be definitely a part of our diet, and all of our veggies, right, were things that I felt very passionate about. And a lot of these patients in my class really know how to cook too. So I'm like, oh, there's so much, that they already enjoy their food, and it's like not taking something away, right? And instead adding. So that's something that I feel very passionate about. I'm very excited to talk about today.
And tell us a little bit more about how your cultural background has informed the way that you think about health and eating, because we also love Mexican food.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember when I was working with a lot of my Central South American patients, they would automatically cut out the corn tortillas, like when they found out that they were diagnosed with prediabetes or diabetes. And it's such a staple in so many cultures. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. So I think just putting myself in their shoes, right? Like I also grew up in a household where corn tortillas were staples. I'm a daughter of immigrants, right? My mom till this day, there's always tortillas in the fridge. There's always, like they say, frijoles en la casa, so beans at home. So I think just really trying to empathize with patients or those who are confused if they should incorporate these foods is no, it's very hard to take something away, that you have had for years and that has even sustained our grandparents and our ancestors, right? And it's more like, what are the other things that can be negatively affecting our health? So whether that's things in our environment, right? Whether it's access to healthcare, whether it's even education on knowing what medications to take, when to take them, right? Or maybe how much veggies can I be having in my plate? Maybe I'm not having any, or maybe I'm not having fiber. So maybe thinking of other things that can still be sustainable for you that are realistic while still honoring your culture and maybe making some tweaks if needed, right? That would complement whatever part of your treatment plan is with your condition. So I think that's something that, is very important for me too. So like if we remove someone's cultural foods, I feel like we're removing a part of their identity. And I think, I don't know, I would feel kind of lost if someone told me like no more corn tortillas, and I know sometimes people try it and, I feel like everyone has the autonomy to decide what they want to explore. But, if they ever feel like that's something that's not realistic for them, there's always ways that they can add to their meals, which we can talk about in a bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's also interesting just like us having the conversation of cultural foods in general. I remember when I worked at a clinic, and I would say like my best friend in that clinic, she was Mexican and she was a therapist. And she said people would always come up to her like, "Oh, do you eat Mexican? Did you grow up eating Mexican food?" And she was like, "No, I grew up eating food." Like I just called it food, So even this idea of like having to say like cultural foods is interesting to me because at the end of the day, it's just food from a different point of view, right? So, what are some of the common myths and misconceptions that you hear about the foods that people grew up with, whether we call them cultural foods or just their foods, in diabetes? Because I know that's a big thing, and that's when I first started coming across like doctors who would say like cut out everything and cut out tortillas, all carbs, and people would be left with like, okay, well, like what is life? So like what are the misconceptions you see?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. Yeah, I think like you mentioned, excluding a whole food group, it sounds like sometimes, right? Whether it's rice or tortillas or like bread, right? Even pastas. So I think that's something that is very common, and a lot of patients sometimes are lost. Like, then what do I eat, right? Or sometimes they may notice I crave even more sweets. And maybe that's because they're just excluding that whole food group. So those are something that's very, very common. And I think even sometimes when I do tell patients, like, yeah, like you can have carbs, you can have, your rice with your chicken and your veggies. They're like, what, I can? Like, yeah, so it's again, even for them, like, because sometimes some of them are a little bit resistant, which is valid, especially if they're, they just were diagnosed and they want to do everything in their power to reduce their blood sugar. So we can always experiment with like, okay, how about, let's start with this amount, right? Let's do 1/4 of your plate, whether it's rice, or let's start with a sandwich. And then sometimes they're surprised, like, oh, my energy returned, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of like them seeing as well and trialing how it feels like when they add carbs again.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Nochebuena is right around the corner. And for those of you who don't know what that is, most Latinos celebrate Nochebuena, which is Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day. And it's an evening filled with lots of food, usually lots of alcohol. So I would love to talk about the unique challenges that people with diabetes have during this time of celebration, whether it's Christmas Day, Christmas Eve. Like I know in our family, ponche is a really big thing, which is kind of like a Dominican eggnog with a lot of rum, and it's really sweet. And I could see that being really challenging for someone that has diabetes because it tastes so good, and next thing you know, you've had like 5 cups of ponche and you're feeling good and your blood sugars are
Blood sugars are not good.
yeah, they're
Or good
going
is the
high.
wrong word. Yeah, they're elevated.
Right. So what are some of the challenges that you see around this time of the year, and like what are some ways to overcome that?
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes like some of the challenges that may come up that I hear patients say too, like, ooh, Nochebuena's coming up or New Year's, like, I'm kind of scared, like, I've been doing so well, so it's kind of feeling that fear. So it's definitely, validating that, and then exploring why they're feeling that way. And then even if sometimes if they want to come up with a potential plan, like, oh, what does that look like for you? Like, what will you plan to eat, right? What food might you want to eat that you've been craving, right? Because maybe your abuelita doesn't always make tamales, right? Or doesn't make ponche all the time. So I think just exploring that it's okay for them to have these foods, but also exploring maybe the amounts that they tend to have. And then what may feel like, for example, if they want to explore their fullness cues, right? And then maybe walking them through that, like, what is a good, I don't know, like fullness level that may work, right? Where you can maybe even make space for more food in an hour or two, right? After you open the gifts or whatever you may do, right? So I think kind of exploring that they can still have these foods, maybe checking in with their bodies and how they're feeling. That way they won't feel like they're eating too much, but also still honoring, this celebration that comes with a lot of foods that they can enjoy. And then, yeah, then just kind of gauging where they're at. Cause I feel like every patient's different. Sometimes I hear patients that say, Krystal, but I just feel like I can't, I rather not. Then, kind of also honoring that, but just making that space for them if they do decide, maybe just having a little bit and then just checking in with themselves and how they feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that approach because what I see happen all too often is they're like, F it, like I'm just gonna go off because January is coming and it's a hard reset for me.
Yes.
And it's like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's fine because I mean, the holidays is not, it's not like it's, you're celebrating for 3 months, but also it doesn't necessarily mean that like you can't do small things to still help manage your blood sugar. You don't have to wait until January 1st or 2nd
Mhm.
to begin.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to talk. So you mentioned the amount. I want to talk strategies next.
Mhm.
I remember a patient that I had. This is like 10 years ago. And it was a similar conversation of like the tortillas. He was Mexican. And I think he was told by his doctor, like, no tortillas. And obviously that's not going to work. So we had the conversation of, well, tell me how many tortillas you're having per meal. And in my mind, I was thinking like, oh, like it might be 1 or 2. And he said 7. Right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's an opportunity where we can still have the tortillas, but maybe we don't have 7 in a meal. Why are you laughing?
Sorry, I just remember. I just remembered I had a patient where it was a similar conversation. I was like, "Oh, how many tortillas are you?" And he told me 26, and I literally started dying. I was like, "What?"
Oh my gosh.
I was like, "Okay, well, we are gonna have to make a drastic change." Like I was like, "God damn, 26 tortillas in one sitting!" Like, yeah,
Yeah.
he was like, "That's how much I'm eating."
Well, that's why it's always good to have those conversations. And as dietitians, we don't judge you for what you're doing or you're
Right.
having. I know
We
that
listen
instance
and we
is
don't judge.
particular. But yeah, like 720, whatever it is, sometimes
Mhm.
it's above maybe what our body can process in that moment. So I'm curious, like, what are your strategies, Krystal, for
Mhm.
helping someone? Because the amount of times we have heard like, you must cut these foods out. You can't have these foods. Like, yeah, what are some of your go-to tips and tricks for people when they have diabetes, but also they don't want to compromise on the foods that they grew up with and love?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I would approach it like, what are these other nutrients, right, that will also be helpful for my blood sugar? So, in terms of like their protein source, right? So, let's talk about tacos, for example. So, if I have that in mind, I'm like, okay, what's my protein, right? So, if I'm going to go with chicken, so I'll have maybe 1/4 of my plate or so, or even if I have it as a side, that could be an example, or even if I have it as a filling with my tacos. So then we talk about carbs now, right? So whether that's 2 to 3 corn tortillas, so that could be like my carb choice, right? And then other things like my fiber, right? So whether it's like pico de gallo or whether it's like radishes or cilantro or even nopales, which is like cactus, right? Like other ways where we can add that fiber. And then we have our protein, our carbs, and that all together will really help to slow down the digestion, right? Which will help in preventing having a quick sugar spike because of the carbs, right? So you're still enjoying your tortillas, but you're also, mixing it in with these other components and even having some fat, right? Whether it's fat from the chicken or if you want to add some like avocado or guacamole. So having those different components, I think would be very, very helpful. And then checking in with your fullness, right? How's your satiety? Are you feeling satisfied? Maybe I didn't need to eat like 2 more tortillas, right? On top of that, because maybe I'm feeling like pretty satisfied. So that would be something, that you could even apply with other foods. So like, let's say we're doing another protein, like let's say fish, right? And then I want to eat rice as well. So now I'm like, okay, I got my protein down, my carb, what am I missing? So I would go to like my fiber. So maybe I want to now eat some beans. Maybe I'll have like a handful of beans as well. So beans have so much fiber. And when you also pair that up with rice, again, it's going to really slow down the digestion, which will help reduce like the blood sugar spike. So yeah, there's different ways, right, to kind of still enjoy your carbs, but maybe the way we dress them up, I would say,
Yeah.
is very important.
I love that. Now, we need to talk about white rice because I feel like the internets are fighting about this. I
Mhm.
feel like people are like dang near doxing dietitians over the white rice conversation. Like they're the devil for saying like people
Yeah.
can eat white rice. What are your takes on white rice versus brown rice?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I'm a white rice girly. Like I my white rice. I've tried brown rice for, when I was first learning about nutrition, because I was also like, yeah, it has more fiber. But with the white rice, there's ways that we can still have, as we mentioned earlier, like a healthier blood sugar spike, right? By pairing it up with something else with fiber. So, because brown rice, I believe, has like a gram of fiber or more. So then I'm thinking like, okay, then white rice has 1 gram less. So, what are other things I can add, right, that have that fiber? So, then that's when beans come into the picture, right? And just for reference, I'm a big bean girl too, but 1 cup of beans has like around 15 grams of fiber. So, I'm like, wow, already if I add like half a cup of beans, I'm already going to get like 7.5 grams of fiber, right? If I add that with my white rice. So for me personally, that is something that also will be more sustainable for me. So even with patients, it's like, what's more sustainable? Is it more sustainable to have brown rice? Or is it more sustainable to have white rice and then pair it with some fiber, right? Where you can still enjoy it, along with your protein. So that's something that, to each their own. Some people really like brown rice so they can continue. But if you don't, that's totally okay. You can do the white rice and maybe just pair with some extra fiber.
Yeah, and the amount matters too, because like,
Yes.
if you're having tortilla and
Mhm.
rice, then your glucose is probably gonna spike a lot more, so it's like,
Mhm.
try to pick 1 carbohydrate per meal, like, maybe you have the tortilla for lunch, and then you have the rice for dinner, so that you're dividing it a little bit more. Same with, like, corn or any other starchy vegetable.
Mhm.
And also, it's important to just see how your body responds. Because for some people, they might be more sensitive to rice, like period, whether it's brown or white, than root vegetables, for example. Like
Mhm.
I've been experimenting with my mom because she's using a CGM,
Mhm.
and it's so interesting because, like in DR, root vegetables are huge, like plantain, squash, yuca, malanga, like yams. And root vegetables will not do much to her blood sugar. Like
Wow.
2 hours post meal, like her glucose will be like in the low 100s. And then she has rice and it'll go over 200.
Wow.
It's so
Yeah.
interesting. So, we've been having conversations just about like, okay, if you're going to have rice, then you're going to have a lot less. But
Mhm.
she has started consistently eating more root vegetables throughout the week because they are more gentle on her system. And they're also like a staple in our culture. So she enjoys them as well. So, if you are doing like glucose tracking, that could
Mhm.
be a good tool to just see like how your body responds to different things.
Yes, yes. I think that's such a great point. You just gave me a little flashback. One of my patients too. Yeah, he's like, Krystal, I tried white rice with the recommendation with the fiber, but yeah, it's really there's other grains, right? Like that work, like beans. He's like, with beans, I'm not spiky. I'm like, okay, then let's continue with beans. But you're right, it's so individualized.
Yeah, you got to go with what works. Well, speaking of patients, I would love for you to share an example of someone that you've worked with where their A1C has improved while eating their cultural foods. Because I think that might be helpful for people. And also, like, what were those cultural foods? What was the combination of different foods like? Because they might use that as like an idea for how they can plan their meal.
Yeah, definitely. So something, that has been very helpful is having those 3 meals a day. So, that way we can promote more steady blood sugar because if you're having that window for breakfast, for lunch and dinner, right, you're more likely to have more regulated blood sugar, especially when you're having that balance that we mentioned earlier. So like your carbs, your protein, your fat, and your fiber. So that can vary, right? So like let's say like kind of like what you mentioned, Wendy, picking a carb that they want for that morning. So whether it's oatmeal, right, with some yogurt with their protein, maybe some chia seeds or other healthy fats and fruit. And then they can rotate, right? Maybe another day if they want to do another carb as well, and another combination of protein, fat, and fiber. And then moving on to lunch. So maybe they're craving tacos for lunch, right? And they want to do tortillas. And then maybe later for dinner, they'll do some rice, right? So typically, like even when we talk about rice, what I've seen with patients that has been helpful, sometimes they'll do like 3/4 of a cup or a cup. So it can really vary again based on like their glucose monitoring and then pairing that with again whether other protein choices that they like. So that has been what has been helpful because they're not like missing out on a specific nutrient. Because something that I've seen where they start maybe craving more sweets is when they don't have a carb. So maybe they're doing it for breakfast and lunch, but maybe for dinner, they're like, I don't want to eat carbs at night. Like, I just feel like it's going to affect my blood sugar. But I've seen that it's been more helpful when they stay consistent, right? So carbs for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, and trying to eat within like 4 to 5 hours, like your next meal, has also been very helpful. And for some of them too, depending on your activity, right? Because every patient's very different. Like if you have a very active job, I've also seen with this patient, like when they ate a snack in between their meals, they were like, wow, my blood sugar is better. Maybe what I really needed was to eat a little bit more. Maybe they were under fueling. So sometimes too, your body can compensate, right? And then you might experience higher blood sugar when you're not eating as frequently, even though your body is hungry. And then lastly, some other thing that was helpful for this patient is like also monitoring their stress because they're like, wow, Krystal, when I'm noticing like I got a phone call and it stressed me out a little bit and I started seeing my blood sugar like rising, right? But then I did some deep inhales and some breath work and it started trending down. So I think looking at things from different angles, right? Like our food, our stress management. We can get some steps in throughout the day. With patients I've seen, even walking is very helpful, like 30 minutes, 5 days a week. If they throw in strength training twice a week as well, has been very helpful. And it doesn't even have to be something like HIIT, right? Where sometimes patients are like, oh, I have to go hard, super intense. It could be also something low intensity that will, again, help your blood sugar throughout the day and also sleep, if they can. And sometimes when it all feels like, oh man, this is like too much, right? I know all these things can be helpful. So even starting with 2 things, right? So for this patient, maybe they weren't walking 5 times a week, maybe it was twice a week, but as they built on, right, they started walking more and started seeing those positive changes.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because movement is a very important component to it all, especially during the holidays. It can make such a difference. So, I would
Mhm.
love for you to share some practical movement strategies that people can do during the holidays to help manage their post meal numbers.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. So after a meal, right, sometimes we may start feeling that fullness, depending, right? Because sometimes some of us may eat a little bit more during the holidays or not. But even like in 30 minutes, if you can go on a walk, maybe you have like some cousins over or friends, like, hey, you want to take a walk, right, around the neighborhood? So I think that's also something that can be social, but you still get your steps in, even if it's like 15 to 30 minutes, something very quick like that. Or even, yeah, doing things outdoors, right? Whether it's a trail with a loved one, especially if you have family and friends over. So maybe even finding ways where you can still be social during the holidays and still have some type of activity. Other things that come to mind are like dancing, right? With some of us, sometimes there's a lot of dance. So even that's movement. So it doesn't always have to feel like it has to be like a structured workout. It's like, hey, y'all, like, let's get up and dance, right? We ate an hour ago, the music's good, like, let's dance. So I think those could be other fun ways where it doesn't feel like I'm following a routine for this holiday.
Yeah.
But if they do choose to go to the gym, they also can do something that works for them that doesn't have to be super structured, like a week that's not in the holidays. And then as they, transition back to their routine, they can go back to what that structure felt like for them.
Yeah. I'll never forget this patient I had. She was a Chinese woman and she was eating a lot of, foods from her culture. And I don't recall her making too many dietary changes. But what I do recall was she had pre-diabetes, like almost closer to diabetes, with her labs. And I do remember seeing her at the gym because I made the recommendation, like, go to the gym, like, do whatever you want to work out, but like this gym is nearby. And she liked that idea. So I would see her at the gym when I would go because my clinic was like in my neighborhood that I used to work at. And lo and behold, her A1C came down like outside of the prediabetes range. And that was like the main thing
Wow.
that she was doing. And it was so cool to just be like, yeah, girl, get it. So I just want to second exercise is very, very powerful, even if you change nothing about what you're eating.
Yeah, that's amazing.
For somebody who is, let's say, newly diagnosed with diabetes or prediabetes or even PCOS, like anything that might affect their blood glucose levels or their health in general, what words of encouragement can you share with them so they don't feel guilty, they don't feel shame, they don't feel like they have to give up their cultural foods, but also like maybe their health is important to them and they want to figure out a way to make it work? Like, what is your word of wisdom?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, first, really want to honor, that whatever they're feeling is valid, especially when there's like a new diagnosis, right? And especially after those conversations or recommendations you may hear from a doctor, which sometimes can be scary or sometimes can be affirming, right? But I would really, really recommend if they can meet with a dietitian, right? Because I think just having someone there with you to kind of provide that guidance to help you process what you're feeling and even to provide these strategies, right, that are very also individualized to the patient on how to help regulate their blood sugar. And a lot of the times it's having these sessions on a consistent basis where you can create goals together and then, work towards something. So kind of like a lot of the things that we mentioned today. I think having like that dedicated person that you process, like, okay, maybe today I want to meal prep, like, can I have some support on that? So just knowing that you're not alone and there's like resources, right, to help support you with your new condition. And then just to help, know that there's ways that your blood sugar can improve, things will get better. And it's like just taking it day by day, right? What's something like a tiny habit, right? Like a tiny goal that I can make that feels sustainable, and just trusting the process, even when it feels like it's hard to see that outcome. But yeah, just knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel for that.
Mhm. Love that. And for our listeners who are like, I want to work with Krystal, can you tell us about how they can sign up and work with you, whether it's for prediabetes, diabetes, prevention?
Yeah, no, of course. I'm accepting new patients, so yeah, feel free to sign up. But you can visit our website at diabetesdigital.co, and then you can take a look and then read my bio if it's something that would work with you. And then yeah, you can fill out our self referral form and book with us, and then we can follow up with more info too.
Amazing. Thank you, Krystal. It was so
Thank
wonderful
you.
to have you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you're interested in nutrition counseling with one of our expert dietitians to help improve your prediabetes or diabetes, visit us at diabetesdigital.co.
Also, if you found our conversation helpful, do us a favor and rate and review this podcast on iTunes, plus share with someone who might find this helpful. You can also connect with us on Instagram at diabetesdigital.co.
And tune in every Wednesday for practical, inclusive, and culturally humble diabetes insights. We'll catch you later. Bye.